I'm trying to time this, okay? Before I take the next section, let me get any reactions you have to these 8 Beatitudes. The first 4, I think, present relationship to God, and I think come real close to giving us a plan of salvation. The next 4 talk about relationships we have to other people. And they seem impossible, especially the second 4, okay? So that the only way we're going to be able to accomplish them is if we are in a right relationship with Christ. But he says that when these things are true of you, then you're receiving all the blessings that God has for you, not just happy in a short-term sense, but all of the good things that God has for you are based on these qualities. Any thoughts?
My thought is one way to read this is a person ought to obtain all of this or should seek all of these beatitudes. But the other way of reading it seems like there's a bunch of people that are this, poor in spirit, and a bunch of people that are meek, and they will inherit this and that. So it's not like one person must have all, but there's a bunch of different people that are this and that.
Well, you could understand it that way. I rather think that it is a package, okay, and that it kind of comes together.
Well, yeah, the other way is like you read it as a progression of what you said in the first 4. It's
yeah.
like there's a progression in terms of salvific.
So it's not like different things that bring you blessings. Oh, you are at least a little bit blessed if you are a peacemaker. Oh, this
Doesn't say a little.
Yeah. And you can see the relationship to them. For you to be a peacemaker, you're going to have to be gentle. You're going to have to be merciful. You're going to...
You have to seek righteousness.
Huh? Yeah, you're going to have to seek righteousness, okay? And so they're really kind of hard to separate.
It's describing this one group of people.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think that I take them as a package, okay? And understand them that way. Okay, let's move on. Verses 13, I'm going to go to, let's go to 16, okay? You are the salt of the earth, but if the salt has become tasteless, how can it be made salty again? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot by men. You are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden, nor does anyone light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on a lampstand, and it gives light to all who are in the house. Let your light shine before men in such a way that they may see your good works and glorify your Father who is in heaven. So he starts out, you're the salt of the earth. Here's a question. How are disciples of Jesus like salt? How are we supposed to be like salt?
Make an impact because salt does
Okay.
impact directly wherever it's used.
Yeah. You put salt on something, it changes it, doesn't it? In the ancient world, salt was oftentimes used as a preservative, okay? It still is. It still is sometimes, yeah. If you don't have refrigeration, one way you can keep your meat from going bad is what? Put a lot of salt on it. Okay? Sometimes salt is used to add flavor. It's got nutritious value. In the ancient world, they paid people in salt. You've heard the saying, somebody who's worth his salt? That comes from an ancient practice where people were paid in salt because it was valuable. I'll read what the Moody commentary says on this, not necessarily because I agree with it, but it shows us what the options are. He says the main point of salt in this text is not to create thirst or serve as a preservative against the moral decay of the world, but to improve taste, to make the world a better place. Now, I see three options here. One, it creates thirst. Two, it preserves. And three, it improves taste. Moody takes the last version of that. And I don't know, we have to choose between one of those or another. But those are things that salt does. How do Christians do those things? How do we act as salt in the world?
Follow the Bible.
Huh?
Just follow the Bible.
Follow the Bible, okay. And hopefully, if we're doing that, we're what? We're making the world a better place. We're improving the taste of the world. We're preserving the world. It's a decaying place. Maybe as we bear witness in the world, we make people thirsty for the gospel because they see Christ in our lives.
But what does it do with the preservative aspect? Like following the Bible. What are you, like, preserving the truth? What are you preserving as being a salt? Because that's the most common usage, I guess, as a preservative. That's what Jesus was.
Yeah,
referring to.
that would have been.
What are you actually preserving as being a salt in the world?
Well, you've got a world that's falling apart, that's decaying, that's full of sin. And if there's at least a pocket of people who are what? Living righteously, following God's law, doing what God says, living for Him. Does that slow the decay of the whole world? I hope. I remember Genesis chapter 6, and I won't turn there or quote it in length, but it talks about in the days of Noah, every thought and intention of their hearts was always wicked all the time. It's like there wasn't any bright spots anywhere. And so God destroyed the world with a flood. The next time He's not going to destroy the world with a flood, He's going to destroy the world in fire. But what's keeping that from happening? Oh, all kinds of things are keeping that from happening. One is He's being gracious and the gospel's going forward, okay? But one of the things is that we keep the world from being more wicked than it is. Huh? Or we should. Huh?
Like,
Now.
For example, the Christian response to the transgender madness is a preservative for the culture.
Yeah.
This is civilization.
Okay. Now, notice this phrase, though. He says, but if the salt has become tasteless, how can it be made salty again? How does salt become tasteless?
It doesn't.
It doesn't, that's right.
It's like it's almost not really paradoxical, but like an impossible statement. The true salt will never change its structure because it's chemically stable. all the
Yeah,
time.
right.
Unless there's something in the ground that's mixed with it, or like I don't know, the salt of the land.
So it's not pure salt.
It's not pure, right.
There's no way that any salt in Jesus' time was pure salt. Our pure salt is chemically purified. They were mining it,
Yeah,
and it was not sodium chloride pure.
yeah. So here's what Don Carson says. He says, strictly speaking, salt cannot lose its saltiness. Sodium chloride is a stable compound, but most salt in the ancient world derived from salt marshes or the lake rather than by evaporation of salt water, and therefore contained many impurities. The actual salt, being more soluble than the impurities, could be leached out, leaving a residue so dilute it was of little worth. Okay? Here's the thing. The salt becomes unsalty, not because salt becomes unsalty, because it gets mixed with a bunch of other stuff that's not salty, and then you don't get the benefit of the salt. It's not in my notes, but one source said this. He said, here's the problem with salt. In order for salt to do its job of preserving things, it has to come in contact with those things. But the problem is that when it comes in contact with those things, then those things come in contact with the salt, and the salt becomes less salty. So that gets to this question. Should we remain separate from the world so that we stay salty? Or do we have to engage with the world so that our saltiness does what it's supposed to do?
Keep digging for more salt.
Have to keep digging for more salt. You see, we there's a tension there, isn't there? If we don't come in contact with the world, if we don't try to affect the world, then we're not doing our job. But every time we come in contact with the world, the danger is that we're going to let the world rub off on us, and we're going to become more worldly, and we're going to be less salty, and then we won't be able to do our job that we were supposed to do in the world. I don't have a ready solution to that, but I think just the awareness that there's that danger ought to give you some pause as you think about what activities I engage in and what activities I don't engage in. Okay. Look at the last one. You are the light of the world. How are disciples of Jesus a light to the world? I think that's easier to deal with, right? Sproul says, though, it seems strange because Jesus said he was the light of the world. Is there a difference between the way Jesus is the light of the world and the way we're the light of the world? Quite a bit, actually.
Not that much.
Huh?
Not that much. The same source of light.
It's the same source of light, except this, that Jesus generates light himself. And what we do is we reflect his light. One friend of mine says it's like the difference between the sun and the moon. The sun generates light, and the light that comes from the moon is what? A reflection of what's coming from the sun. So my friend says, I want to be a full moon. You know what keeps a full moon from being a full moon? This is an astronomical fight. The world gets in the way.
Is that a joke?
No, it's actually the case, but you can spiritualize that, right? But here's the phrase that troubles me some, okay? Let your light shine before men in such a way that they may see your good works and glorify your Father who is in heaven. People struggle with, wait a minute, I thought we weren't saved by works. What is this about seeing good works and so on? It's not the works that save you, but it's the saving of you that generates the good works. John says that these two analogies, the salt and light, they militate against all forms of separation and withdrawal that says, I'm just going to go join a monastery, or I'm going to go hide out someplace and practice my Christianity and never come in contact with any non-Christians. We're not allowed to do that because we need to make an impact on the world. Okay, let me go to verses 17 to 20, okay? Do not think that I came to abolish the law or the prophets. I did not come to abolish, but to fulfill. For truly I say to you, until heaven and earth pass away, not the smallest letter or stroke shall pass from the law until all is accomplished. Whoever then annuls one of the least of these commandments and teaches others to do the same shall be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever keeps and teaches them, he shall be called great in the kingdom of heaven. And then verse 20. For I say to you that unless your righteousness surpasses that of the scribes and the Pharisees, you will not enter the kingdom of heaven. Notice what Jesus says. He says, don't think that I came to abolish the law or the prophets. I didn't come to abolish, to fulfill. What's the relationship of Jesus to the Old Testament law?
As a human, he's bound by it. He needs to also
Uh-huh.
to act upon it and to
Mm-hmm.
obey it.
Notice, Jesus says, I didn't come to abolish this. MacArthur says Jesus was neither giving a new law nor modifying the old law, but rather explaining the true significance of the moral content of Moses' law and the rest of the Old Testament. He said, I didn't come to get rid of the law. In fact, I'm going to fulfill it. What does it mean to fulfill it? I'll just give you a part of what Don Carson says. He says, the best interpretation of these difficult verses says that Jesus fulfills the law and the prophets in that they point to him and he is their fulfillment. And so you look at the Old Testament, and in the Old Testament you've got prophecy after prophecy, you've got symbol after symbol, you've got the sacrificial system, and all of these things are pointing to Jesus, and he is fulfilling those. He also fulfills the law by keeping the law. He never disobeyed it. MacArthur says it this way. He says, this speaks of fulfillment in the same sense that prophecy is fulfilled. Christ was indicating that he is the fulfillment of the law in all its aspects. He fulfilled the moral law by keeping it perfectly. He fulfilled the ceremonial law by being the embodiment of everything the law's types and symbols pointed to, and he fulfilled the judicial law by personifying God's perfect justice. And so every way you want to look at the law, Jesus is fulfilling that law. And he says, not a single letter or stroke, not the smallest letter or stroke will pass away. Letter or stroke, I should tell you, the smallest letter in the Hebrew alphabet is a yod. It looks just like a little hook. And it doesn't even take up a whole line. And then there's a smallest part of a letter. It's called a tittle. And it's just a little flag that it's on the end of certain Hebrew letters. And he's talking about the jot and the tittle. No part, not even the part of a letter, not even the smallest letter, is going to be passed away until it's all fulfilled. And so there he says, whoever annuls one of the least of these commandments and teaches others to do the same will become least in the kingdom of heaven. So how do we deal with that? Especially in light of a verse like Romans 10:4, which says that Christ is the end of the law for those who believe. Seem like they're saying almost the opposite thing, don't they?
The end is fulfilling.
Huh?
The end is fulfilling.
Yeah, he's fulfilling this, okay? And so he's not doing away with this. This continues to be a part of, if you will, the Christian canon, the Christian Bible. It's part of our teaching. And we recognize that Jesus has fulfilled it. And in some sense, things have been changed. But they're not done away with. Here's what Stott says. He says, of course, some of the elements in the Old Testament law were abolished by being fulfilled. They had pointed forward to what had now eclipsed them in their fuller light brought by Jesus. But the moral law had not been abrogated. Indeed, Jesus goes on to intensify its demands. I think Stott's thinking particularly of the sacrificial system. Jesus is the final sacrifice. The temple is no longer in existence, and there are no more sacrifices. But there don't need to be any more sacrifices because he fulfilled the sacrificial system by being the final sacrifice.
So he satisfies it.
He satisfies it, yeah. On the other hand, we can very quickly go to the Ten Commandments and talk about the second table as thou shalt not murder, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not lie. Do those still apply? Oh, yeah. In fact, they're repeated in the New Testament, both by Jesus and by Paul and the other writers in the New Testament. Then here's the verse that causes all the trouble. Verse 20. Unless your righteousness surpasses that of the scribes and the Pharisees, you shall not enter the kingdom of heaven. What do you think Jesus means by that?
It's a quality, not a quantity.
Huh?
It's a quality, not a quantity.
Quality, not a quantity. Okay. Okay, I think that's what the ESV Study Bible is getting to. It says Jesus calls his disciples to a different kind and quality of righteousness than that of the scribes and the Pharisees. They took pride in outward conformity to the many extra biblical regulations, but still had impure hearts. Okay? MacArthur says it this way. He says, on the one hand, Jesus was calling his disciples to a deeper, more radical holiness than of the Pharisees. Pharisaism had a tendency to soften the law's demands by focusing only on external obedience. In the verses that follow, Jesus unpacks the moral significance of the law and shows that the righteous law actually involves an internal conformity to the spirit of the law rather than the more external compliance of the letter. You're going to have to be righteous not only on the outside, but on the inside. On the inside. The Pharisees worked real hard on the outside to make themselves look righteous. And Jesus called them whitewashed tombs. He wanted a righteousness that was more than skin deep. But if you're a Jew in the first century and you hear this, you say, the Pharisees, they're the most righteous folks we know. And Jesus says, you got to be better than that. How do you deal with that? I think this is where Luther's claim makes some sense. What we've looked at so far already sounds impossible. I can't do it. I can't live that way. And so I need a righteousness that's not my own. I need the righteousness of Christ applied to my life. The only way I'm going to be able to stand before God is with, I think Luther called it an alien righteousness. And a righteousness that's not my own. So that when God looks at me, what he sees is he sees Jesus and he sees his righteousness. And that's the kind of righteousness that he's calling for here, is that level of righteousness. I think that's probably a good place for us to stop tonight, because 21 to 48 gets into another long section, and we'll probably deal with that tomorrow night. And then we'll see what we do the third time. Okay? Any questions on this? Any comments you want to make on what we've covered so far?
So I guess at this point, verse 20, you want to go back to first couple of verses in the Beatitudes and say, oh, I'm the poor in the spirit.
I'm poor in spirit, that's right. This verse does take us back to the beginning and say, oh, yeah, I don't meet this standard. I can't do this. But verse 20 also is going to introduce 21 to 48, because in 21 to 48 we're going to have a series of eight statements where Jesus is going to say, you've heard that it was said, but I say. You've heard that it was said, but I say. You've heard that it was said. And I think what he's doing in each of those cases, I'll just introduce it, and we'll come back and talk about it next time, is he's saying, this is what the Pharisees are saying about God's law. They're wrong. And this is what I say about it. And I'm digging deeper to the real intention of that law and getting past the skin deep, okay? I mean, the obvious one is this. We'll get to it in there. They say, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. Well, actually, what the Bible says, what the Old Testament says, is you should love your neighbor. It doesn't say you should hate your enemy. What Jesus is going to say is loving your neighbor involves loving whoever you're close to, which would include sometimes your enemy. And so he's going to take issue with the Pharisees who say, don't murder. Jesus says, don't even hate. Because it's that hatred that led to the murder. And don't even let it start. He's going to talk about they talk about don't commit adultery, and he's going to say don't even lust. Okay. Trying to remember Dennis Prager. You probably don't know Dennis Prager. He's a Jewish commentator. You've heard of him, okay?
PragerU?
Huh?
The PragerU?
PragerU, yeah. He came out not long ago and he said, in Jewish culture, we're not concerned with what's going on the inside. It's all on the outside. And so if you're viewing pornography and it helps your sex life with your spouse, go for it. There's nothing wrong with it. I just go on record, and Jesus will make it clear here. He has a different opinion, okay? And I would argue that the Old Testament has a different opinion, that Prager's misunderstood his Old Testament. But then I'm biased. I think Jesus is right, you know. But we'll cover that next time. I think what we'll do is we'll shut this down for now, okay?